All right. I'd like to remind everybody we're live on YouTube this morning. My name is John Ogilvy. I'm the Climate Action Coordinator for West Hants. I'll be chairing the meeting just until we elect a chair of the committee. But I'd like to call the Climate Action Committee meeting today to order here at 11:02 a.m. I think we should start with some introductions as we have some new members today. I'm John. I'm the Climate Action Coordinator for West Hants. If we can start to my right with Carrie over here.
Thanks, John. Carrie Fougier, I'm the Manager of Planning. I'm stepping in for Sarah Poirier, Director of Planning today, but as she heads out on leave next month, I'll be taking over while she's away.
Jim Ivey, Councillor for Windsor South, District 11. Pleased to be here.
Perks, newbie, flyby into the world of climate action change. Oops.
I'll have to say it again.
Just say it.
Yeah.
Am I there?
You're live now.
I'm Brenda Perks. I'm a newbie to the Climate Action Advisory Committee.
Hi, I'm Carly Rochon. I'm the Director of Financial Services for West Hants Regional Municipality and have been on the MCAP committee since 2020.
Hi, I'm Deanna Snare. I'm the Executive Assistant and Municipal Clerk at the CAO's office, and I'm stepping in and holding a seat for CAO Phillips, who's at another meeting.
Good morning, everyone. Todd Richard, Director of Public Works with West Hants.
Good morning. I'm Bonnie Smith, Councillor for District 10.
Debbie Francis, Councillor for District 5.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. So we'll move right into the election of a committee chair and vice chair. So every 2 years, most of the committees with the municipality require an election for a chair and vice chair. So we've already done introductions, which is good. So I'm going to start right away with asking for nominations. So are there any nominations from the floor for chair of the Climate Action Committee for West Hants Regional Municipality? For the second time, are there any nominations for chair of the committee?
I'll nominate Debbie Francis.
Okay. And for the third and final time, are there any other nominations for chair of the Climate Action Committee? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Francis, would you accept your nomination?
I will.
And hearing no further nominations from the floor for chair of the Climate Action Committee, I declare Councillor Francis as chair of the Climate Action Committee for this term of 2 years. Thank you and congratulations, Councillor Francis.
Thank you.
If you want to take over chairing the committee now and would like to host the election for the vice chair.
Sure. I will call for nominations for vice chair.
I'll nominate Brenda Perks.
I'm going to call for nominations again, and I'm going to nominate Councillor Bonnie Smith. Any other nominations? Third and final time. Any other nominations? Brenda, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do.
Bonnie, do you accept the nomination?
Sure.
Okay, so we will go to a vote. So we have green pieces of paper. So we'll write on who we are voting for, and I will ask Vanessa to gather up. Hi, Vanessa. I'm just seeing you on Zoom. It's Counselor Francis. So have you heard where we're at? Right now, we're voting for vice chair. We have, if you want to maybe private message, Vanessa, we have citizen member Brenda Perks and Counselor Bonnie Smith. So if you could message Vanessa privately, please. Thank you.
Apparently my laptop does not want to connect. So let me just try on my phone.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Okay, sent.
Thanks, Vanessa. It is. For folks watching at home, we are just tallying the ballots and we'll be to you in a moment. So I would like to congratulate Counselor Bonnie Smith as Vice Chair of the CAC Committee. So moving, and I'll have a motion for us to destroy the ballots, please, if someone would like to make that motion. Todd, seconder. Bonnie. Vanessa, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So I'll give this back to you. Okay, moving right along on to 3, approval of the agenda and additions or deletions. Is there any additions to the agenda? Looking, no, can I have approval for the agenda as submitted, please?
I'll move to accept the agenda as submitted.
Counselor Ivy, seconder, please.
Second.
Director Richard, all those in favor? Single by hands. Perfect. Motion passed. Thank you. The approval of the minutes from September 11th, 2024, they were circulated. So a motion to approve the minutes or any questions on the minutes?
I'll move the approval, adoption of the minutes.
Thank you, Director Richard. A seconder. Thank you, clerks or Deanna Snare. All those in favor? Single by hands. Approve of the minutes. So we're going to move right down to new business and we have a presentation and introduction to the CAC with John Ogilvie. Yay.
Thank you, Chair. Perfect. Thank you, Vanessa. All right, so as we have some new members on the committee this time, I thought it'd be appropriate to do an introduction to the committee and some of the progress we're making and where we're at this point in time. And next slide. Perfect. So the Climate Action Committee was formerly known as the MCAP Committee. And it is a forum essentially for all West Haines Regional Municipality departments and council representatives to discuss and work together to implement and evaluate our climate actions as a municipality. So as you can see, there's a list there of the voting members, including 3 councillors, 2 resident members, the chief administrative officer or their designate, and each director of the departments of the municipality or their designate, as well as the protective services manager or their designate. Next slide, please. Oh, perfect. So the deliverables of the committee include developing an annual work plan and submitting that plan to council to be placed on file each year. Keeping council fully informed on the progress of climate action plan implementation, including the municipal climate change action plans, which is where the acronym MCAP came from, and the local action plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. As well, to undertake, as the committee determines appropriate, pilot projects that carry out actions outlined in the MCAPs or the local action plan, funded in part or in whole through the committee's approved annual budget. So the meetings of the committee, generally there's 4 meetings per year in February, April, September, and November. We're in the November one, the second Wednesday of the month at 11 a.m. here in council chambers at 76 Morrison Drive. But additional meetings can be called by the chair of the committee if needed. So what is an MCAP? It stands for Municipal Climate Change Action Plans, and they were developed for Windsor, West Hants, and Hantsport in 2013 and 2014, and they were a requirement of the 2010-2014 gas tax agreement from the federal government. So there are 2 major components to an MCAP. Firstly, adaptation. So how do we deal with the climate change effects and hazards that are already happening and will continue to happen going forward in the future, as well as mitigation. So reducing emissions. How do we prevent climate change from happening at a quicker rate? So these MCAPs focused on how climate change itself could impact 8 potential hazards throughout Windsor, Hantsport, and West Hants, including drought, wildfire, inland flooding, coastal flooding and storm surge, winter storms, tropical storms or hurricanes, coastal erosion, and extreme heat events. These are the 8 major identified potential hazards for this region. Essentially, an impact matrix was used to develop action items in each MCAP and prioritize the actions to address those hazards, as well as a greenhouse gas emissions inventory in each plan and suggested action items to reduce those emissions. So the Partners for Climate Protection is a program developed by ICLEI Canada and Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and essentially assists municipalities to develop, implement, and monitor an action plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, both at the corporate and community levels in the municipality. And so it is a 5-step milestone process, and through that process, it essentially assists us in developing those plans and overseeing them. West Hants, as a standalone entity, joined PCP in 2018, and now the regional municipality is a member. So here's a graphic just displaying the 5 milestone steps through the PCP program. So first step is creating an inventory of greenhouse gas emissions within your region. West Hants achieved that on June 9th, 2021. And milestone 2 is to set a target for emissions reduction. West Hants and council voted to set a target of a 45% emissions reduction by 2030 for both corporate and community emissions. And that was also achieved June 9th, 2021. Milestone 3 to develop a plan was achieved on November 29th, 2021. And right now we're currently in milestone 4 to implement said plan to reduce greenhouse gas emission. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in 2020, GHG inventory was developed for the region, including corporate emissions, which are those that result directly from the municipality's corporate operations. So public works, community development, the vehicles that the municipality owns and uses, the facilities and buildings to do water and wastewater treatment, as well as staff business travel, solid waste resulting from the administrative facilities, and lighting such as street lighting. As well, community emissions, which are the bulk of the emissions in the region, which are those that result from residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional activities throughout the region. So these include agricultural uses, industrial activities, commercial and institutional. Transportation is also a big one, as well as residential and solid waste. So in 2021, council approved the greenhouse gas emission local action plan to guide those efforts to reduce our emissions, including that goal to achieve a 45% reduction in both corporate and community annual emissions by 2030. So here for the committee, I've listed some of the major ongoing projects as part of the local action plan, as well as through the MCAPs to achieve the emissions reductions and enhance our resiliency to the ongoing impacts of climate change. So first and foremost on the list is our PACE program, stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy, Switch West Hants, which assists homeowners in the municipality with energy saving retrofits to their home. Those retrofits are targeted to achieve a cost savings benefit for the homeowner, so that we involve a loan process for the homeowner to pay for those upgrades, and then they are targeted to the upgrades will save more money either on their energy or their fuel oil bills as compared to what they're paying on their loan for the upgrades. We have level 2 EV chargers here in Windsor, one with 2 plugs at the West Hants Sports Complex and one with 2 plugs at the Windsor Community Center. And they're pending installation of level 3 EV chargers here in Windsor. And those will significantly increase our ability to encourage EV adoption throughout the region. Municipal fleet transition. The Planning and Development Department recently purchased an electric vehicle for the building inspectors to perform their inspections. And we're looking at continuing that transition as time goes on and retiring our current gas-powered fleet of vehicles and investigating electric options. Performing facility energy audits with Efficiency Nova Scotia. They offer a roving municipal energy manager service, which is a free service to the municipality, to audit the energy efficiency of our facilities and our buildings. And they help us develop a plan for efficiency-focused upgrades and identify funding opportunities to do those. The Home Flood Protection Pilot Program is a council initiative, but essentially it is to identify home flood risks throughout the region for applicant homeowners and implement upgrades to enhance resiliency throughout the region. A local transportation service feasibility study. We're currently investigating funding opportunities to have that study performed, which would assist us in developing a plan to enhance connectivity and reduce emissions from transportation in West Hants. And last on the list there is a solar energy feasibility study, which was completed just this past fall, which will assist us in developing a plan to build a solar installation that can help us offset our electricity consumption as a corporate entity here at the municipality. So that is a brief overview of the committee, some of its history and some of our ongoing projects. I'd be happy to take any questions or discussion points at this time.
Thank you, John, for the update and going through the list. I was just making notes and looking at the things we have done and have ongoing. So it's great to see. So does anyone have any questions for John on that? Brenda, do you have any questions?
Not this time.
Okay. Councillor Ivey.
Thank you. So just a couple, can we go back to slide 7, which is, I think it was the one that had the impacts of climate change, and so focus on how climate change can impact 8 potential hazards: the drought, wildfire, inland flooding, coastal flooding, winter storms, tropical coastal erosion, and extreme heat events. We've had many of those, perhaps not all of them, but I guess where I was trying to line that up, and the other piece of this is the MCAP plans were referenced here for Hantsport, Windsor, and was it Falmouth? Was West Hants. Do we have copies of those, or can we get those circulated or a link to them? Just, I think it'd be good to reference if you look back at those plans for 2014. And I remember actually somehow landing in one of those meetings long before I thought about sitting around the table. But just, it was an interesting discussion they had on the risk of inland flooding. And the reason that I raised that, I'll try and make this long story short, is that when we look at the goals of the committee itself, the policy and adaptation procedures are intended to help protect people, protect properties, special places, and municipal infrastructure from the negative impacts of climate change. And I guess I'd raise that as a discussion point or highlight that if that's the primary goal of the committee, the majority of what we seem to have here, solar and the EV chargers and reducing GHG gas emissions and the like, which are helpful, but they aren't specifically towards what I would call protecting people or places. And I just wonder if we need to, I guess, take a look at what we have for initiatives within the committee here as being something where the lens is more specifically on what we are experiencing here as people suffering property damage, health issues and the like as a result of some of the effects we're seeing with flooding and other items noted up here. It just struck me that when I'm going through what the objectives are of our committee, that is about protecting as much as it is about preparing for reduction of gas emissions and so on that we have. So I don't know if you have any comments on that, John, or anybody else would like to speak to that, but I just want to be clear as to if that's our goal, then how do we line that up with all the initiatives, which are wonderful initiatives, but how do we line that up?
John, do you want to respond first?
So I guess first and foremost, those plans are on the climate action webpage portion of the municipal website.
Thank you.
So all three of them are there, so you can look at them in there.
Thank you.
I am looking at some of the adaptation side of things as well. There hasn't been a lot of funding opportunities to date for adaptation initiatives. And a lot of them currently from the federal government and the provincial government have been focused on emissions reduction. Now, I am hearing word that there is some more renewed focus from the federal government on funding for adaptation. So as they come out with that, I'll be looking into that more specifically and likely bringing recommendations to the committee to apply for that funding. Adaptation work can be very, very expensive, but it is certainly necessary. So and some of those are projects currently for adaptation that are ongoing that weren't listed in that, but like, for example, the Windsor flood study that Public Works is working on with CBCL at this time. Those are adaptation actions that we're working on at this time as well. But I didn't specifically reference in that list.
Absolutely appreciate that. And also appreciate that all initiatives that are going to fall underneath climate change are going to be initiatives that are going to be very expensive and costly. It's like when vinyl siding first came out, everybody was getting it and the price was crazy. So one of those things that it's a very big industry at the present time and trying to get ahead of it. So thank you for that. Appreciate the reference to those documents specifically, and I may have more on that afterwards, but thank you. And also didn't mean to ignore the fact that within the initiatives, you did have the program launched in the last year on the Home Flood Protection Program, which certainly does serve from a property and personal protection standpoint, fit in what I believe to be the goals. I guess I'd look forward to seeing what else we might see that is protective in that nature related to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ivey. Does anyone have anything to add to that, or Director Richard?
A good discussion. Like John said, there is a lot of other things that are happening since this was developed. So we could probably do some updates, include the phase 1, phase 2 flood study reports, but also things like our new municipal standards that mention climate change, building infrastructure to meet the climate change projections, and even the disaster mitigations. Water plants and sewer plants have to be built to that standard. So all kind of related to climate change and the more intense extreme events that we are seeing that are weather related from climate change. So probably some updates we could put in there. Some good points.
Thank you, Director Richard. Good comments. Anything else? Director Rashawn.
Thank you, John, for the great presentation. And I do apologize. I know you were talking about procurement of electric vehicles. So I didn't hear the procurement policy. So I just wanted to make sure that that was also referenced, because we did make changes for the scoring for sustainable procurement as well.
John?
Yeah, I ran out of room on that slide and I didn't want to make a second one. But we did update the procurement policy to include a very specific section on sustainable procurement earlier this year. So that is a big portion as well. Thank you, Director Rochelle.
Thank you. And I'm just going to, I had a note there And when we're talking about the electric vehicles and things, we do have electric Zamboni as well that council purchased. So, you know, we are making strides to bigger strides. And so I just wanted to put that plug out there for that. So if there's no further questions, we'll move on to 5.2 recommendations for CAC 2025 work plan.
Thank you, Chair. As I referenced earlier with the goals and deliverables of the committee, the Climate Action Committee must submit an annual work plan to council to be placed on file. So there is a recommendation there on the screen for the committee, as well as I attached a draft work plan to the report to the committee for your review. But essentially, some of the major highlights that are in the draft work plan, we moved a couple of work items to the completed section, such as recommending the amendment of the procurement policy. It was moved to completed as that was done earlier this year, as well as having done a solar energy feasibility study, which was recently completed this fall. And then essentially, we also added to the to complete section of the draft work plan, explore building a small to medium scale solar energy project, which follows the solar energy feasibility study and has recommendations for where we can do that and how best to do it. Explore including anticipated greenhouse gas emissions in staff reports for council and committees. And that would require an amendment to the meeting and committee procedural policy to amend the report format that goes to council and committees, as well as exploring transit and accessible transportation feasibility. And as I mentioned previously, we're still exploring some funding options in order to get that study completed. But that is in the to complete section in this draft work plan, as well as the major ongoing tasks that are probably going to stay in the ongoing section for a little while. But implementing a level 3 electric vehicle charger, which we're continuing to work on within the region, administering the PACE program, Switch West Hants, which will likely stay in the ongoing section for the foreseeable future, as well as continuing to investigate our buildings and facilities for retrofits for efficiency, which will be an ongoing task for the foreseeable future as they continue to grow, and we have numerous facilities that need differing upgrades for efficiency. But if there are any questions from the committee on the draft work plan as is, I would be happy to take them. There's also the recommendation there on the screen for the committee.
Thank you, John. Is there any questions on the work plan for John? Councillor Ivey.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through you to John. So within the deliverables that we have identified for the committee, it identifies the requirement for us to have the initiatives identified, but also cost estimates. And I note that within the work plan, we don't have cost estimates at this point in time. Are we at a stage where we need to get this through in November for purposes of getting the work plan through without the cost estimates attached to any of the items that are there? Or is this something that we would deal with when we come back in February or a separate meeting? But not having any cost estimates, we're putting forward a list of items, which is great, but I think we should have a sense of what it is, maybe on an order of magnitude as to what we're looking at if we're putting this forward as a recommendation to council. Just my thoughts.
John, do you want to tackle that one first and then?
So some of them are very difficult. So for example, the exploring, including the anticipated greenhouse gas emissions and staff reports will take staff time essentially and council time. Whereas the first item under the task to complete to work on milestone for the PCP program, that is a larger item that's made up of smaller components. So that item is always in the work plan. That's what we're always working on. But more so the following one, which is to explore building a small to medium scale solar energy project. That is really dependent on the size of the project that the committee wants to recommend or that council decides to approve. But at this time, once the solar energy feasibility study comes to the committee for review, it'll give us a better estimate specifically of what size of system the committee may want to recommend to council. And that will really will determine the cost. But it's very difficult to estimate a cost for a solar system without a specific size at this time.
And I'll just chime in there and I'll look for Director Rashawn to help me. I do believe there's funding in the budget that council put in for a solar project, whether it's in the capital budget. But I do recall a conversation around this table, then taken back to council for funding for that solar project, because I'll be honest, that's the top of my list, because we have spoke about that for at least 2 years around this table of different sites and funding options. So am I wrong on that? I do believe I recall an amount was put in either the budget or the capital budget for a solar project. And maybe you just, and I can go if there's further questions, Carly, while you double check that.
Yeah,
If that's
through-
easier for you.
Through you, Chair, I'll just open up the capital budget. I do recall our conversation, I believe even maybe at the last MCAP before we became CAC meeting to discuss that. There was a motion here. However, the motion was specific for a funding application, and we were unsuccessful for the funding application.
Mhm.
So that was linked to that. So it wasn't carried over or set aside for any solar project, but it was part of that funding application for a solar project. But we were unsuccessful in that application.
So just to follow up on that, there was a motion of council or the spirit of council to support that. So that may be a number we want to take forward before the budget year, or keep in mind when we're looking at the budget for 25, 26 to keep that on the radar for a project. Councillor Ivy, do you have a follow-up?
So I know that I believe it's noted in the report here that we did fund the study that involved CBCL. I recall that initiative being brought forward to council, and it was looking at doing a pilot or a small scale. And I don't know that location ever got selected. And I think that's where things sort of got delayed, I guess, in that regard, if I could say it that way. And I guess for me, like on an order of magnitude, I can appreciate that it's difficult to try and get costs around some of these projects, but there is going to be an order of magnitude of $1 million plus, $1 million less, or like in some range, they have a sense as to what we're looking at, talking about these. That something like that can also let people know as to how big the project's intended to be, I think, if you're, so just, my comments on it in that regard. But I do recall it making its way through to council too.
Thank you, Director Rashawn.
So through you, Chair, in the capital budget, we had the 100,000 for the solar energy feasibility study. We did also discuss the small scale solar project, which had a $25,000 allocation in there. And I know at that time during budget deliberations, we were hoping the solar feasibility study would provide us with the ability to develop a scope for that small solar project. So it is timing of that piece as we were hoping to offset, of course, municipal energy consumption with the small solar project.
Thank you for that. Sean, do you have something to add for that?
Just something very quick, Chair. If I remember correctly, when we discussed the funding opportunity that Director Rashawn mentioned we were unsuccessful with, the committee had discussed a project in the scale of somewhere around $250,000. So that would give us an indication at the previous iteration of the committee's desire for size.
Yeah, and I was thinking 250. I just didn't want to say, I was hoping maybe Director Rashawn had something in print before I put a number out there.
Yeah, as of right now, it's not in the capital budget. So I'd have to go through to see and if that motion was made as a recommendation to council, just as from a clerical point of view. But right now it's not represented in the capital budget, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't recommended and is to be included in the upcoming capital budget.
Okay, that's great. So we have time, if that's the number, if committee members have a number that we're comfortable with that can be brought forward. I think this is a, a great discussion on it. We have the plan and we know it's going to cost money, so I think it's something we can work with. And if there are programs, John will be on top of them and that we will apply for. So if there's any direction from committee for that?
So just for a follow-up question on process, I guess. So with this plan, is this locking the plan in for the next 12 months? Is that what we're looking to do? Is this like at the annual November through? So something new shows up that makes sense. And I'm guessing that there must be the flexibility to adjust, change, insert and remove. You don't want to be doing it on everything throughout the year, but I just want to know what we're looking at moving this forward. If it's going through and it's locked in without numbers, more concerned. But if it's also a function of the budget process, in other words, we've got a list of many items here, but until it gets through to the budget side of things, then it's in progress. You've got a note here is ongoing, but we've got a lot of ongoing items here, right? That we don't have a target date or a priority, at least based on what I see within this. So if we've got the ability to tighten going forward, then I'm fine with that. But I'd want to know that we still have that ability to tighten things up.
Thank you. And I'll just speak with that briefly. I do believe we are good at pivoting if something comes up. But I think it'll be on us to be mindful. I know the solar project and going through these, a lot of them are staff time that are ongoing. The major projects all usually depend if we're successful with a grant of some sort. So maybe prior to budget deliberations, we can reconvene to add anything that we can take back to council to approve. If something comes up, we're only November, budget just deliberation won't start till April. So there is time. Carly can let us know when we need to have it in her hands. So Director Rashawn.
Two parts, actually. I did a quick search back to January of 2024 of all council motions, and there's only one council motion referencing solar, and that would be the award of the solar feasibility study. So just as a heads up on that, I could go a little bit further back, of course. And for capital budgeting purposes, we're actually heading into budgeting next month. So it would be great to have some direction from the committee to John for staff to prepare their proposals to come forward to me before February.
Thank you, Director Rashawn. So I guess John, I'll ask you the question. Looking at this, the work plan, not knowing for sure what's coming to us, would you have an estimate that we could be looking at for the 25-26 budget season that we could discuss and submit to Committee of the Whole Council for CAC?
Just to clarify, are you asking specifically towards the solar piece or as an overall?
Overall.
Okay.
Because sorry, we do not have a budget line for MCAP. Or CAC, sorry. I think it's a very small piece of what's in there.
So through your worship, through your chair, looking at the operating budget, there is a sub-department under planning for MCAP. So there is that component. They do have a line item within that for operational work plan related items. But then through the planning and development department, they have the ability to put in the capital projects as well.
Okay, great. Does anyone have anything to add for that or a recommendation or further discussion? Councillor Ivey?
Yeah, just to Director Rochon's comment, because I think that's where it gets important as to where you're going to put your prioritization. If we don't have a budget amount set for what we're going to look to do in the run of any given year, then the list is, it's like going out Christmas shopping without a list. On Christmas Eve, you come home with whatever you found and it's got to be good enough, but is to try and get a gauge as to where we sense we're heading in the coming year, really is the, and to the point that, yeah, we've done the solar feasibility study and we'd talked about doing the small scale solar footprint in some fashion, had discussion about different buildings where it could or may be installed and so on, but without it as a specific target or an objective to be achieved, then we're 2 years later and we haven't pulled the trigger on that one yet. So I think it's worth that, depending on what the timing is for Director O'Shawn, because there's a lot here. And it's, again, I'm not meaning to be critical. I'm looking to see that we get productive with trying to help move these things forward as quickly as possible. And I think that's better done with better information on how we see the priorities of it in tow here.
Thank you, Director Rashawn.
Certainly. Thank you again, Chair. So within the current operating budget, the CAC work plan has a $30,000 allocation. Any unused amounts we try and carry forward to the next year through our carryover reserve. And I'm looking to John for confirmation, but through that line item, we also use it to help us secure grants, because a lot of the grants that we apply for require, of course, a municipal portion. So that helps us actually acquire additional funding to help support our work plan as well. So the funding in that line is not 100% to our internal work on the work plan. It's also to help us secure funding going forward.
So maybe we need to increase that line moving forward, that we could give John direction to increase that budget line. And there could be some other initiatives that come in that I'll look to our public works that, they could work hand in hand on those. So I think that if that's a direction that this committee wants to make as they accept the work plan for 2025, we could make another motion for funding as well, if that is the will of this council or committee. Sorry. Dr. Richard.
Just on the same discussion, it's good discussion, but there is things that inherently happen throughout the capital budget per department. Like, if we're do a facility upgrade or a lift station that we change from a VFD. So maybe we could start tagging some of these items in the capital budget. Just, that's a component of the climate action change. And other things from this committee, if you do have a priority or a suggestion, certainly it could be looked at and implemented into the capital budget, because that's essentially where the, the decisions are made during the capital, council approval process. So then we can kind of see that, but, within each department, but then, the subcategory that does this apply to, climate action change, similar to what, our director of finance was kind of getting at too. So that happens some, even behind the scenes, because we're doing things that need to be done, but maybe we should kind of promote them in a better way. So, which may help.
Perfect. Director Rashawn, you want to add to that?
Director Richard stole my thunder. I was just about to say, we are making some changes in our capital budget this year. We have, and so something that I was hoping to highlight going forward is anything that is a sustainable or a green project, as we do have more and more provincial, federal, and even accounting things that are coming down the line, that we want to make sure we're highlighting these things going forward.
Sounds like we're in the right direction. So Councillor Ivey will wrap it up with.
Yeah, so I think similar to Director O'Shawn and Director Richard's comments just made, is that as an example, just retrofitting on facilities that we have could be a super significant number in the budget. And that we need to be conscious or aware of that as part of the process, that we can say we want to retrofit, but that, and equally, as we know, in facilitating the fleet, moving in that direction, that also is not being done at a lower cost compared to gas vehicles. As we all know, that's a premium, and that's and so what's the timeline or the frame on that? So how long does it take us to shift the fleet over? And so what are you looking at each year? Based on your asset management plan for when the vehicles would typically be retired, and then what's the the bump that we're going to see as a result of that. It just, those things all become helpful in knowing, because a $30,000 budget in MCAP is, I'm not sure what we would do for that. It's like, I'm really not sure where we'd get a $30,000 anything, maybe a 4x4 solar panel somewhere. And I don't know, right? So that's the reason for me being so specific on this, that we need to have a sense as to where we're going to try and head this. So.
Yeah, and I think Director Rashawn was like, that 30,000 helps us with secure additional grants, that gets us the larger projects as well. So I think we all have a clear direction, John, when we're doing budget, and it does come back to us through Public Works or vehicles to council. So it's just not discussed here. We're more discussing how we're getting the 45%. So I think we're good to move forward, Director Rashawn and John. And
Yeah, I would say so. Because
Okay.
again, to Counselor Ivy's point, you know, a retrofit, or even just looking at replacing maybe windows or installing heat pumps, like all of those have an energy saving component, or, you know, a heat saving component. Like all of those can be marked as a, you know, a step, right? And those are not necessarily CAC projects, but they are throughout and also in our grant process. So it's, you know, we have a significant, though we don't see it under the CAC line, we do have a significant investment into sustainable and energy savings.
100%, and council has a bigger one with our municipal complex. So there'll be savings once that decision's made. So I think we're good there. So there is a motion if anybody is inclined to make the motion.
That the Climate Action Committee 2025 work plan, excuse me, be submitted to Committee of the Whole to be placed on file in a manner substantively the same as Attachment A to the staff report titled CAC 2025 Work Plan dated November 13th, 2024.
Made by Councillor Smith. Is there a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Director Richard. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you. Great conversation.
Can I ask a question as part of that too, though?
Sure.
You know, to the earlier question or the comment about the protection of people and property, I wonder if we can somehow get a focus of that as to what we have going. This is all coming out of the work plan. And so in the work plan where we've got initiatives that do have that focus on people and property, that we could somehow find a way to highlight that. John, I don't know that you've got the ability to do that between now and the committee, the whole intent to get it through to council. But if between now and the February meeting, if there's some way, do you need a motion to look at that, or is that doable? If I could ask that question.
I don't know that that would be considered an action item under the work plan unless we get very specific with it.
Mhm.
If that's the desire of the committee, I can add it in that work plan table. That is something, and I do keep that in mind every day as I work here, is that kind of overarching goal of the committee and
Mhm.
what my role is here.
Right.
And so I think that as we go forward, that is going to show through with more of this adaptation funding, especially coming out. But that is something, if that's the desire of the committee, that I could add in.
I'll just speak to that, just being on the committee for several years. I don't think it's necessary to add in on the work plan. I think all of these projects would have the well-being of people and property in mind when we're doing it. So I think anything we do, we're thinking of the well-being of our people and our property. So I don't think we have to specifically have it in there. I would think anything we do or any actions we make or any of these we're doing, that would be on top of our mind as we're doing them.
So if I could just respond, and is that the goal isn't about the well-being of the people, it's about the protection. And protection of people and property is something very specific, which goes to what we've had taking place here, as we can see in some of the action items here with EMO plans and flood-related items and the like. And think we still have some work to be done in that area without getting any deeper into that. But that protection of people and property is what the primary goal here is. And I would encourage us to look at it in that regard. And I won't put it forward as a motion, but I ask that we think about that between now and the February meeting as to what can be done with that. And I'll even look to bring forward what I think would fit within that realm of possibilities for discussion here. We can see where it goes from there. Okay, I didn't come prepared to, that wasn't top of mind when I came in here today at all, just the goal piece of it. But I think that's really important as part of what we do within this initiative. And that may serve as well to assist in freeing up funding to do some of these things with that as the underlying foundation of the purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we good? Okay, we'll move on to 5.3, CAC terms of reference. John?
Thank you, Chair. So there is, oh, perfect. Thank you, Vanessa. There is a recommendation there on the screen. Essentially, I'm recommending that the committee amend the terms of reference for the committee as effective July 24th, 2024, Council had amended the meeting and committee procedural policy to implement a portion of every advisory committee agenda to have 20 minutes of public participation period time. So in order to align and comply with this change to the meeting and committee procedural policy, I'm recommending that the committee amend the terms of reference to read specifically setting aside 20 minutes of public participation periods on all agendas.
Thank you, John. Is there any questions for John on that? There is a motion. Councillor Ivey.
True to form. So the question that I have on this is the terms of reference is almost the same as what we have in the meeting and committee procedural policy, but it's not quite the same. And I look at the information, which I think is really valuable in the terms of reference. And is it intended to be the same but different, or does it actually make sense that the terms of reference form part of the meeting and committee procedural policy itself? I look for input on that. I'm not, they're both so much the same. When you look at what the objectives are, when we advertise to get people to come in and become part of the committee, the terms of reference almost appears to be more informative in that regard to let people know about what we seek to do here. Same, different?
John?
The terms of reference, each advisory committee has their own, so they're specific to the Climate Action Committee. But they do they lay out the deliverables and the goals of the committee. But essentially this recommendation is only to change that specific section so that it aligns with what the meeting and committee procedural policy is handing down for each advisory committee.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, great. So there is a motion. If someone would like to read the motion.
I'll gladly make that the Climate Action Committee recommends that Council approve the Climate Action Committee terms of reference in a manner substantively the same as Attachment A to the staff report titled CAC Terms of Reference dated November 13th, 2024.
Is there a seconder? Brenda? Question on the motion? All those in favor, single by hands up. Motion carried. Thank you, everyone. Is there any business arising from the minutes? I don't see any. If no one has any, we'll move right along and roundtable discussion. So usually at the end of our meetings we have the opportunity to go around the table as it states. And if anyone has anything they wish to say or a brief update, we will go from there. Where it's our first meeting. If you don't feel impelled that you have to, and we'll look for you in February. But I'll start to my left and we'll go to Bonnie if there's anything. No. Director Richard.
Just an update. So we are in the detailed design phase for potential new public works depot. Part of that, with energy efficiency, their consultants are actually looking at the possibility of utilizing the sewage lagoons that are very close by as a heat source. So glycol run through from pipes and try to, capture that heat from the sewage lagoons. So with that, and Councillor Ivey kind of spoke to it, certainly, exciting to see if that's feasible, but that most likely will come at a cost. And that's sometimes the challenge when we're faced with, short budgets and, trying to get a new building that's very, very needed, but also, increasing that cost just to, look at ways for energy efficiency and capitalizing on that heat source that just goes wasted. So that's exciting. We're looking forward to seeing where that's going to go and the potential costs, but I thought it would be good to highlight at this committee. So.
That's great. Deanna, nothing? Carly? Brenda? I'll get you to turn your light on. Thank you.
Just warned me about that. I'm looking to attend the International Climate Action webinar, which is actually a workshop, et cetera, in England in February.
Oh, very good.
So
Well, we look forward to
Bring
hearing
back
about it. Yeah,
big report.
that's
hopefully.
great. We're going to hold you to it and
Yeah.
we'll put a spot on the agenda for you. So
Thank you.
great. That's Councillor Ivey.
Just one thing, if I can throw out, in following the work of this committee in the previous years, and you went to the effort of changing the name of the committee to make it the Climate Action Committee to be more action and oriented and so on. And I don't know what it is but I've hit a stage where I'm not a big fan of acronyms, because in the acronym, you actually lose what the meaning of the acronym is. CAC to us is a really simple thing. It's short, easy to type. There's all the things that go with it. But when we're doing work here at the Climate Action Committee, if you want people to know what it is that you're doing, we should avoid the acronym of CAC, if I could say it. And I will even expand it. I've thought about this, but not raised it at this point in time. But we're putting WHRM on things and it's going in documents. But again, WHRM doesn't tell anybody who we are, where we are, what we are. And we are West Hants Regional Municipality, so I just would encourage, at least at this committee, we might start by referring to ourselves. You saw on the motion, I swapped out CAC to say that the Climate Action Committee, and then I continued with the CAC after that. But really, the more that we say what it is that we are, the more awareness we'll have of people about the work that's taking place and what we're looking to do to try and do that. So for what it's worth, just a comment, you can decide how you wish to or not to, undertake that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. Anything? Nothing. Okay. John, do you have any closing remarks or anything you want to?
Just briefly, I want to thank everybody for coming out, and especially I want to welcome our new members to the committee. And so thank you all for your input today, and I look forward to seeing you in February. If something very important and very prescient, especially in terms of funding, comes up, I will request that the chair ask for an additional meeting.
Perfect. Thank you. We're off to public comments. Vanessa, would you have any update? Almost
No,
forgot.
That's okay. I'm good.
You're good? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. So we have no public, so there will be no public comments. So we can move. The next meeting we know is be the second Wednesday in February, unless,
I
John?
meant to mention that in my roundtable discussion, but that is one quick comment. Our next meeting does need to be moved from the second Wednesday of February because there is a UARB hearing taking place here in council chambers during that time. So I would look for the committee to motion a different meeting date. But a recommendation would be, Vanessa, do you have the days that it would? Either the first Wednesday of February or the third Wednesday.
The 5th or the 19th.
That's yes.
Okay. Does anyone have any preference on that? I don't think we need a motion if we can just give direction.
I just suggest the 5th because of the conversation we had earlier regarding potential budget
Budgets.
impacts, Director O'Shawn and the like, that if we can do it sooner, I think would be better, but just a thought.
Does that work for directors? Everybody? Okay, so we'll say February the 5th, 2025. So with that, I look for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you in February.
Bye.